Well, this is the 4th anniversary of the Monroe County History Club, so we got several people to thank, and it's been a wonderful ride so far. I haven't been here every month, unfortunately, but I miss coming, but I'm trying to get here as much as I can and with my work schedule. But everybody in the room here that's here is probably the biggest part of what the club's all about. Everybody coming, and we start with 6 people, and now we're up to 75, 80, 90 people. So, everybody give yourselves a hand for coming here, because that's what's made the club what it is. The American Legion's been really, really kind to everybody here, and we started out the Monroe County Public Library, which was, a good start for us, but we obviously needed a bigger room and a place where people can eat and enjoy themselves, and so they offered a place to us, and that's been history from there. So it's been a big thanks for the American Legion and all their servers to take care of us here. So Jim Inman Jr., who's had us on the radio several times, and it's been a big part of the club too, and we were on there 3 or 4 times a year, me and Michael, and Christine was with us this last time, and so it's nice having some radio pub and everything, and so it's helped the club out a lot, and we thank Jim Inman. He's not here today, but he's here in spirit, and he said that he'd be glad to have us on anytime we like. So, and George Carpenter here has done a lot of work for the club, and between the videos and the emailing, and so give George a big hand. He's a big part of the club.
Thank you.
Clay Stuckey with the projector, been a big help for the club, and that'd be hard to go forward without that and all our presentations. So big hand for Clay. And Cats TV, which has started recording us a while back, and we don't have all the programs on video, but the last, a year and a half or so? 12 or 14 months, they recorded, so you can go on YouTube and punch in Monroe County History Club, or you can punch in a name of the presenter, like Christine Friesel. If you punch your name in, you can usually bring that program up and watch it, and most of them are an hour and a half long, depending on what the program is. So, and George has uploaded all those, so that's a big project. So it's nice so people that can't get here can see it. So, and that's about everything. And of course, Michael Carter, I thank him for everything he's done. So,
We just don't know what it is.
Yeah. So he's going to announce our program today.
Your job is worry.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm good at that. First, I'll just mention some of the upcoming programs. We've got a lot of them. We're booked up through September, so it's kind of amazing. March 28th, Brad Cook of the IU Photo Archives will be back to give part 2 of his program, which he gave in part 1 in January. It's the history of IU through archive photos, and it went over really well the first time. April 25th, Dr. John Butler will give a program on the flood of 1913 that kind of isolated the city from the rest of the world for a while, even the railroad, which, and this kind of shows the importance of the railroad during that time once they didn't have it. In May, our friend Clay Stuckey is going to give a program on the grist mills of the area of Indiana. We went to look at one of them, which is one built by my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather around 1840, and we went to find the site of that over in eastern Monroe, or western Monroe County, almost in Greene County, and that promises to be really good. June 27th, Duncan Campbell will be here again. He gave a program on barns, you might remember, like a little over a year ago. He's going to give a program on the stone quarries and mills of the area. I saw this program at Bloomington Restorations a while back, and it's really good. July 25th, Steve Roth, another guy that's been here before, of the Civil War Roundtable, will speak about Captain David Buskirk, who was the tallest Union soldier, around 6'11" or so, 6'10", 6'11", and his family. So we're looking forward to that too. August 29th, I just talked to Dan Combs not too long ago, another guy that's been here before. And he's going to actually do his an encore one, because the first time there were probably 20 people here. So it's been a couple of years ago. This is on the great flu epidemic of 1918 and how many people it killed in this county and nationwide. And being an old pharmacist, I'm interested in stuff like that. So we're looking forward to that. And I just talked to Bob Hamill, who's here today. I went to see a program at the History Center the other day that Bob gave on some great Negro athletes of Monroe County of the past, some pioneer athletes like George Shively, Bill Garrett, and George Taliaferro and others, and it was really well received, and so he's agreed to give that in September. So that's a pretty good lineup. Now we get back to today's is Christine Friesel. Skip and I have known her quite a while. She actually had a lot to do with us, with our very first meeting, because Skip and I had talked in the Indiana room one day, probably loudly.
Yes.
A lot.
Yeah.
And so we asked her, what if we bring 6 people in, can we talk somewhere? And to get us out of the Indiana room, she said, yeah, we'll put you down in a little room downstairs. But we had to give ourselves a name, which we had even no plan of giving a name, so we came up with Monroe County History Club. So, it worked out okay. So she's responsible for a lot of this. So she's going to give a program on her Monroe County Timeline project, which she's been working on for a while. And this kind of leads up into the upcoming bicentennial. So, Christine?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's fun working with repeat customers to the Indiana room at the public library, because sometimes they're looking for something and you can't find it, and it just really, scratching your head, and about 3 weeks later you'll find it, and when they come in you're like, I found it. So it's a lot of fun to be among friends. Thanks. Is the mic working? This is the one that you want me to use, right? I'm torn between 2 microphones, feeling like a fool. Okay, I want to show you the timeline, but I'm realizing that from the back it's going to be pretty tiny. And I know that from being here, you really do like rich, beautiful photos. So I'm going to try to go through my presentation quickly so I can show you more of the timeline. First of all, you know how the more you study local history, the more questions you have, and the more you realize you don't know much about history. Well, that's my case. I'm always asking questions. I find out a new factoid, and then I just ask more and more questions. So working on the timeline, in 1960, Mayor Lemon was pretty upset because the police officers raided an IU drinking party, and they called it a comedy of errors because the kids just went scattering. And the mayor was pretty frustrated because his police officers are professionals. It's not a comedy of errors. They're implementing the law, they're holding the line. But one of the people who were caught at the drinking party was the IU coronation queen. And I think she was pretty because she didn't get charged. But she said in a statement, I was a victim of circumstance, just a victim of circumstance. So I leave that question with more questions. What does she mean, a victim of circumstance? And can I use that? So these are the type of questions I have. Another one was in 1961, the sheriff went to the county commissioner. This is Sheriff Kinzer. And he put a gun on the podium and he said, these guns don't work. Our 3 guns in the sheriff's department don't work. We went out for target practice for the first time. It was May. And he's confessing that the first time the sheriff department is doing target practice is in May of that year. And he says our guns don't work. We should fire every once in a while, and every other time it actually works. And so this is a question I have. 3 guns in the sheriff departments. He can't mean 3 guns, could he? Maybe he's got an arsenal of long-range rifles, and these are just the handguns. And was this just a stunt to show that he needs money? Was he exaggerating? Did he just want to avoid cleaning them? Or was there a typo in the newspaper? Really, were there maybe 13 guns, 1-3 instead of 3? So these are the type of questions I have, and I just go to the weeds. I don't, anyway. So I'm going to show you some more of these events that I have discovered through the timeline, and I have questions, and so I hope that you can answer some of them. I want to show you the timeline. I want to tell you about my favorite events. I call them data points for the nerds out there. And we want to ask you what you think needs to be in the timeline. We're 200 years old. I know that not all of us have lived through all that time, but there are some significant events that you think kids really need to know. And of course, I want to thank the people who contributed to the timeline. I want to thank our county historian, Joyce Poling. I want to thank the Monroe County History Center. I want to thank IU Archives and all the volunteers who are adding content. So let's get started. I'm going to first start out with, well, this is the next slide. I'll read this for the television. A Greenwood minister recently shot a peeping Tom in the face with a fine shot. He will peep no more. Bloomington is troubled to a certain extent by these characters, and some of the citizens have intimated that they are loaded for him at his next appearance. 1895. A lot of the events that are in the timeline have a lot to do with our media. It's a theme these days. I don't know if you want to call it fake news or making news or manufactured news, or if it bleeds, it leads. But if it was in the newspaper and it gets into the timeline, you might wonder, why is this an event? Is this really historically significant? But in the back of your mind, keep on thinking that this timeline should be targeting our fourth graders, our third graders, as they study Indiana history and county history. What do they need to know? And what would they want to know? Maybe they're bored by when a building went up, or when they got rid of the horses and they got a police car. Maybe they only care about criminals and colorful characters. So we do want to put things in the timeline that will attract the youth. But I just couldn't resist to start off with the peeping Tom. Sorry. You can see where this is going. We're sliding. So what do we tell the children? I'm going to pass out some index cards. If you could just please write something very simple, what you think every fourth grader in Monroe County needs to know about Monroe County. Is it the limestone? Is it the criminals? Is it Little 500? Is it how generous we are? This town right now has at least 900 grassroots organizations, churches, philanthropic organizations. We are tremendously generous. Is that what we want our kids to know about Monroe County? Mike, would you help me pass these out? So we all know limestone is an important part of our history, but what about limestone? So if you can be specific, that's okay. And next time there's a history club meeting, maybe we can read the top 10 responses and see if you all agree. The timeline started with actually our digital collections. I passed out some handouts of when we started digitizing old books, old photos, old documents, starting off with our limestone heritage in 2010 with Indiana Bedrock. Again, working with the History Center and Indiana University. We next did a digital collection called At War at Home. We wanted to find out what was happening in Monroe County during the Civil War. Did you know that the newspaper from that time burned in a fire? So how are we supposed to know what Monroe County was doing during the Civil War? Well, we basically pieced through everything we could get our hands on during that time period and sort of reconstructed a timeline. Yeah, we were protesting back then. Then we did the Smithville newspaper. We did a timeline for that. Then we did the Monroe County Community Collections, which is basically a shoebox of stuff that we think is cool. We're going to digitize. We have yearbooks in there, city directories, St. Charles photo archives are in there. There's other things I'm missing, I'm sure. Oh, the first 3 ordinance books of the city, the county commissioner books have been digitized. Of course, they're in cursive writing. So if anyone wants to stay home in their pajamas and transcribe for us, now that they can do it because they're online. So we've been digitizing, and as we're digitizing and making a case to our funders, sometimes they're grant funded, as we're making our case, we need the timeline to say, this is a big deal, this is a unique resource, and it should be preserved. We also now have the Hoosier State Chronicles, which are the oldest newspapers that are pre-copyright protected. Okay, I have to go through fast here because I want to get to the timeline. The timeline is created by the community, for the community, to help us prepare for the bicentennial. It is the authoritative index of historically significant and curiously interesting events. Now, I am an amateur genealogist, and I've been working in local history for about 10 years now. But I really care about the curiously interesting events because I do enjoy kids, and I do want kids to be involved in history. And sometimes you really do need that curiously interesting events. Did you know? To attract the kids. And I really would like to get this resource into the classrooms. And you can imagine teachers have a lot of ideas from people on the outside of the classroom on what they should teach. Kids today needs to learn. Yeah, teachers are kind of rolling their eyes. So we want to make sure that this really does appeal to kids. And of course that it's authoritative. Why are we doing this? Local history partners should be organized, efficient, and collaborative. You know, the History Center and the Public Library have a great relationship. I know what their strengths are, they know what my weaknesses are, and we overlap, and sometimes we duplicate, but we do know how to work together. And of course, IU Archives, we know what their focus is, but we do need to work with them. And the timeline could be an exhibit for our online collections. And partners and users do need an index to events before 1970. A lot of people think they should walk into the Indiana Room and find out when that cell tower, or excuse me, when that radio tower did not go up. There was a radio tower that was going to go up, and then it didn't. So when was that? Okay, can you give me a time? I think it was in the 50s. There's no index to the newspaper before 1970, and the one that came right after 1970 was created by the Indiana Room staff. So we really are hard-pressed for events before 1970. So the timeline does focus on events and topics that were of interest to Monroe County before 1970. Yes, there were LGBT before 1970, but that's not a topic on the timeline. Yes, there were Hispanics before 1970 in Monroe County, but it's just not a priority because we have the HT index we can use for that. But we really are hard-pressed for events in the 1940s, the 30s, the 20s. We need to know when we got major infrastructure, and this again is to help us with the bicentennial. So we did a pilot in this century. In 2014 we did a pilot. In 2015 we did a call out for volunteers. We do have volunteers adding content. And then now we're at the phase of doing community engagement. I've got PSAs on the radio. Of course, Bob Hamill helped us with our first one. We're probably going to be doing a trivia game on the radio station. And again, we want to know what you think kids really need to know. Database entry can happen anywhere, so if you are interested in contributing content to the timeline, just let me know. I'll give you a login, and you can add. So for partners, we wanted to provide leadership for the bicentennial. We wanted to improve access, discover primary resources, identify materials that really need to be digitized. It's not easy finding money to digitize old photos and old documents, so if we agree on which ones are on the priority list, that helps. Of course, we wanted to create a resource for educators and students, and for the community, we think it would be fun to engage people who are already producing local history, have a new starting place. When did this happen? And now we have a central neutral platform for people to start their search. We do think that the timeline will improve community pride. As Lou Malcolm used to say, maybe we'll spit on the sidewalks less. Of course, and generate excitement for the bicentennial. Our target audience is the academics, of course, who have deadlines, and they do need proof or evidence that an event happened. The amateurs, sometimes they're genealogists, sometimes they're just people who really need to know or curious, and they just go on one tangent after another. This is good entertainment. It's wholesome, and at the public library, it's free. Repository staff. A lot of our repositories use work-study students or interns. These are young students who are not from Monroe County. They need a quick finding aid to help other people, so it's efficient. Preservationists, people who really want to make the case to preserve a house or to preserve a park or a particular building. They need to know, get the facts right and quickly. Genealogists, of course, and students. So I'm going to show you quickly my curiously interesting events, and I'm going to show you the timeline here, I promise. Okay, this is a lot to read, but I just want to say, and we're going to start from the back end and work our way up to modern time. In 1867, the Bloomington Progress was reporting how bored they were. So is this really an event? I put it on the timeline because I wanted the kids to see how the newspapers were proud of the fact that they couldn't wait for the next suicide. The Bloomington Progress reports the city of Bloomington is distressingly buried of sensation at present. No murders, frightful accidents, hairbreadth escapes to chronicle, and our imagination, usually such a fruitful source of supply, utterly refuses to turn off a single item. And then just a few days later, I think it's August of 1867, maybe the students are gone. Dole will scarce express the condition of Bloomington just now. No suicides, no murders, marriages, or accidents to tell of. So this is what the newspaper wrote about in 1867. 1848, women are finally permitted to use the public library, but also the public library was looking for a librarian. The board, and they found one, and he said, I'll do it as long as I can keep my dentist shop and see my dental patients in it. 1881, transportation, there are new rules. Each passenger for the railroad, each passenger may ask 7 questions of the conductor between each of 2 stations. The conductor must answer these questions civilly without swearing or looking mad. 1882, Charles Duncan, age 14, is barefoot when he is hired to work for Showers Brothers Company. We'll talk about Showers a little bit more. And when you're writing on the index card of what you think is really important, of course, Showers Brothers, I'm hoping, would be in the top 20. Charles Duncan, or Charlie, this is one of those tangents or data points taken way too far. I spent a long time with Charles. Is he really hired barefoot? 1882, you know what? Maybe if you think about who Charles was, the K in his middle name stands for Kirkwood. He works for Showers for about 46 years. I eventually find out that he was so loved. He was in the community band, big-time band player, and he was encouraged by his friends to run for county treasurer. He lived for a very long time in the house that is now the Runcible Spoon. And I discovered a letter that he wrote to one of his friends, Mr. Woodburn, where he's complaining about Mayor Lemon, who's robbing everyone blind. This is taken too far. But now when I pass the Runcible Spoon, I think of Charlie and how loved he was. 1882, Register's Restaurant is considered, it says it opens, or it's promoting itself. And in 1979, James Register, is this the same as Jim? I'm not sure. He says this is the first restaurant in Monroe County. Now, again, I have more questions. Is this true? How do we prove it? Is it a big deal? Who cares? Well, if you're new to Bloomington and you run across the name Register, maybe you should know who this family is and how long they've been here. And it might help you as you're navigating through the political. Here's another one. 1909, is this a commentary on how well the Register family is loved? Or is this a commentary on our newspapers being bored? Again, this is from the Smithville News, calling the county treasurer Register a freak. And this is because he refuses to take additional money to pay for his driving out to the boonies to collect taxes. And they call him a freak. And again, the kids need to know this is how well respected he was. 1919 crime. Okay, this is the Prohibition era. I would love to spend all the time on the timeline on booze, but I have to grow up. Okay. Police raid an IU student. This is a first-year law student, Faye Cullen. He has over 500 quarts of whiskey in his room. He is charged, and one of his attorneys, he has 2, is the former mayor, and he gets off. 3 weeks later, oh wait, he's at it again. But here I want to point out that we found an article about Faye. And again, this is really your tax dollars hard at work because I dug a little bit further to find out true educational value for our 4th graders. The booze was given to the hospital. Now, again, I have questions. Why was the booze given to the hospital? Did they need to conduct tests on whether or not it really had a certain alcohol content? Did they use it for the patients? Did they have to dispose of it officially? So somebody tell me, what is the hospital doing with this alcohol? sterilizing instruments.
It's medicine.
And it's homemade, okay? So we're moving the home brew around. But this is covered by Indianapolis newspaper. Okay, 3 weeks later, he's at it again. He has now a blind tiger on wheels. They confiscate 18 quarts of whiskey that he had traveled with to an unknown customer. When you read the newspaper account of this incident, the police raid the front door. His buddy opens the door and he says, "What? This is nothing." And they run through the house, breaking all the glasses, and they have a huge tub of alcohol that they just, quickly, dump out. And they take the samples to the chemistry lab at IU to verify. What happens to Faye? I think he ends up a chicken farmer, but I had to just abandon it and get back to my real job. Okay, 1923. Now this story I could not, and I still can't let go. And again, Esther Beck is found by Melvin Reeves as he is on his way to the Garrison Chapel Sunday School. He hears and moans of the dying girl. He turns off the path and finds her lying on her back where she had evidently fell exhausted after climbing over the rail fence. He runs to Hemroth's farm for help, and upon returning a few moments later, he finds that the young girl had died. We will show you this on the timeline because the town went crazy. IU president said to the fraternity boys, "Go look for her." And you guys know where the Adams Brothers house is on 2nd Street near Wendy's, across from Seminary Square? The Adams Brothers were her uncle. They were, of course, attached to the hospital. They were attached to the Chamber of Commerce and the bank. They got the businesses involved, and people were looking for her. They were going wild. She had some mental problems. She was a nursing student. Her mother was an Adams sister. And Lena Beck, who started the public library, her mother, Lena Beck, also was very active in the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the state president of that temperance union. So as this was going on, her mother is very busy with keeping people sober and fixing the hospital, creating the library, and this happens, and the whole town goes nuts looking for poor Esther, who eventually goes mad in a field. Garrison Chapel Church Sunday School, there was an award for the money, and Garrison Chapel really was a little awkward about accepting the reward money, but they needed to fix up the church. I think they bought new windows with it. So this was pretty far for her to wander by herself in February in her madness. And when they found her, she had just barely died. But I wanted to show you this story because when they had an agreement, as a prearranged agreement, that as everyone was looking for her, they would sound off the whistle at Showers Brother Factory when they found her. So just imagine this town in February on a cold day when that whistle goes off and everyone just stops. And I mean literally everyone. Okay, something a little bit more cheery. 1924. This is in the promotional brochure. James Madison always says if you want some great photo for Indiana digital collection, basketball is the way to go. So that's the way we did. This is Smithville News. Of course, Bob Hamill knows all about Floyd Trissler and the exciting day when a very small basketball team from Smithville won the Tri-State Regional in the University of Cincinnati, 1924. I'll talk to you more about Floyd in a little bit. 1930, we also want to put on the timeline when things did not happen. In 1930, we tried to get the VA hospital here. The Chamber of Commerce was really at it. It didn't happen. We were declared out of the running. Sad day. 1931, the public library was having trouble with kids running about, using the telephone, talking too loud, loitering, sitting on the steps. Finally, the mayor said it was okay for the custodian to arrest people. 1932, the organizations, under topic of organizations, the 10th annual state meeting for the WCTU, Christian Temperance Union, of course, was in Bloomington. And if you look under the category of organizations in the timeline, I have to admit, I was really surprised and impressed how many statewide organizations, trade associations, philanthropic associations had their conferences in Bloomington. We were really attractive to those. A lot of professional leadership came from the campus, from the hospital. So of course, in 1932, we are the place where people are coming to say temperance union is the way to go. And so we invite all these people to come down, and IU President Bryan is saying that the effort to legalize liquor is doomed to fail. Here's a trivia question, if we do have something on the radio. A trivia question. Where did William Lowe Bryan get that middle name? It's his wife's name. He changed his name. This is a progressive town, right? Okay, 1937. This is one of my favorites. The community chest. This is the Depression. This is the precursor to the Community Fund, precursor to United Way. And so they kick off their fundraising campaign by setting off bombs on the courthouse lawn. Again, I ask a question. Is this really fireworks? What do they mean by bombs? Business and industry. Kelly's Restaurant. This is Emmett Kelly, who would become the mayor shortly after this. They shut down his restaurant because of the ration board. He has overdrawn his account, and Kelly decides he has too many satisfied customers, and he can't afford to run the restaurant. 1950, Chester Burks is the turnkey at the county jail. He's in charge of the keys, and he admits to breaking out Lester. Chester breaks out Lester. I just can't stop myself from saying that. Again, I have more questions. It says here that Chester is only 17 years old. Is that a typo? Did the jail allow a 17-year-old to be in charge of the keys? Was he a genius? Was he a nephew?
Was there Sheriff Marshall Gillis?
So now I want to know what happened to Chester. Okay, I'm not going to look, though. I just have to move on. But in 1951, the Sheriff Department did try to improve on things. There's a lot of proof that they were trying to make themselves more professional. And so that's when they get their first uniforms. And I'm thinking, really, 1951? I think that's late. Is that right? People, y'all are nodding your head. What did they wear before? Suits? Overalls? Okay. What did you say?
Hoods.
Hoods? Oh, my lands. Yeah, I'm not going to answer. You're disqualified from giving me any more ideas. Okay, this is the timeline. And I will show you that when you search the timeline, you can look for the most significant events. Now, who are the people tagging these as significant events? Some of these people are work-study students. Some of them are volunteers. Some of them are experts within the community. We need your help to find out really what is the most significant. So this year, 2017, and probably even into 2018, we really would like to clean up this list and really load the most significant events for these topics. I'm going to read them for the people who can't see me. Our topics are African Americans, agriculture, arts and culture, buildings, business and industry, cities and towns. Cities and towns would be anything other than Bloomington. Crime, demographics, education, festival and events, fires. Fires was one of the first things we put in there. General history, government, IU, lakes, library. Library, I think, has the least amount of data in there. Limestone, media, military, natural events, organizations, politics, public health, public works and utilities, recreation and sports, religious institutions, schools, science and technology, transportation, trivia, and women. Let's, for kicks and giggles, let's do everything in public health. When you click on everything, you're going to get a lot, and it's going to be slow. So we don't encourage you to do that, but we think we can improve things as we get closer to the bicentennial. So if you see that there's a gap in 1939, you can say, I'll index 1939 for you. I'll read the newspaper and find out what was going on with public health. You can also search. So now I have all events in public health. And I type in the keyword PCB. Now you can see why is there, who cares about PCBs? Why is that in there? Well, you know what? We needed this timeline for another project. We really did need this, and we already had most of it done, so we just imported it. We can tuck it so that it's not, we can hide away the unpleasant stuff, we really can, but we just put it in there. Like we did with limestone. We already had a timeline of limestone up to 2010. So you can search and browse the timeline. I'm going to go back and bring up the Esther Beck story. I'm going to have to switch my... Her mother went to Berlin as one of the, I think this has to do with, yeah, International Council of Women. So this is how serious her mother was into leadership in Monroe County and how significant it was. So when you bring up a data point, I know it's hard to read from where you are. This just gives a summary of events. And then if we're lucky, we have a link to the image. And this would be, the images are going to be quite challenging for us. You can imagine that we cannot put anything up that doesn't have copyright or permissions. And that's a huge hurdle. And it's a lot of maintenance or management barrier for a project like this. So anytime that we can get our hands on an image or mine the old yearbooks or city directories, or we can mine the old photos that we've already digitized, we're going to use that to promote. So this takes me to a photo of Esther. How did we find that photo of Esther? Well, we used our yearbook index, and we said, I bet we can get a photo of her from the yearbooks, and that's how we did it. This is one of our digital collections. Oh, let's go back. Take a while to load. Are there any questions? I'm only half an hour in. Yes. I have a question? No? Okay. Well, let's spend some more time on crime. How about that? So you can imagine if we're just recreating what news was covered, the sensational stories get a big headline, right? And so that might indicate to one of my students that, hey, this is a big deal. It's a big headline. So imagine if the newspaper way back then is not profiling certain segments of the society. Maybe on page 6 on the left corner, the bottom left, is a section called Colored News. Well, if we're just replicating what the newspaper was covering back in the old days, then there is some value to that because it's still an index. But why don't we try to get beyond the standards that were in play or the customs that were in play way back when? I just loaded all events. You can see what you get. Maybe you want to not have a headache, so let's just go on.
Do you have any reference on the 1907 fire at the Bloomington Roundhouse?
The 1907 fire at the Bloomington
There were
Roundhouse.
two major structures the railroad had south of town that burned in 1907.
Well, look. So if you are confident that it's 1907,
Yes.
I'm looking for all events under transportation. That might be too much. I don't know if we have a lot in 1907. Not much, you can see here. But just so you know, if you find that hard to read and you want to print it out, you have a printer-friendly version. And everything here will have the source citation. Now, there are some things that we uploaded that do not have the source citation, and that's because for some reason the script went bad, and we are recreating those. So if you see something that doesn't have a source citation, we should already know about that, and we're working to get those back in place.
Actually, there was a fire there, but I'm not sure about the date.
Okay.
There's a photograph of it. It's not a very good photograph of the fire. I mean, very, I mean, hard to read. Hard to see.
Take 1904 to 1908.
I think with the History Center, it said that they find two primary documents that have different dates for when Ellettsville was established. And they're like, which one do we put in? And I say both, because let somebody else who really cares to dig further find that out. Oh, I didn't.
That's how Bloomington Railroad burns.
Really? Okay, let me do, sorry.
Top left.
Top left, Bloomington Railroad Depot burns. The Louisville, New Albany, and Chicago Railroad Depot burns, and a lightning strike. In a lightning strike. The brick structure is replaced by another brick building somewhat smaller. Maybe we need to add more. Was there a hero involved? Was it a large expense? Sometimes you look at the events and you think, are they related? How long did it take to build it back? When the Presbyterian church burned, the church had a building, I think the next year, a limestone structure. And I'm just like, imagine today a church, like Sherwood Oaks going down and then the next year building it. So that would say a lot. Maybe they were already planning to build. Maybe they had easy access to a donor at the limestone company. So for crime, what I did is I asked some of my work study students to just mine some of the documents that we had access to, or newspapers we had to by decade. So sometimes we had the 30s news, and again, if the newspaper thought to cover it, we put it in, whether or not that was really a big deal or just sold newspapers. If you see your ancestor here, we just put it in. It's just, we put it in. But you note that we don't put events in after 1970. We might put business history, political history, but anything to do with crime, we really want to avoid things after 1970 because there could be some fresh wounds. It's really not that important. But the further you go back in time, when you have an ancestor who was a hoodlum or a colorful character, the further back you go in time, you can say, oh, that was that side of the family. It becomes interesting, even humorous. Let's toggle back to the timeline. But if it's too close to you, it's like your brother, you have to bail out of jail. You just don't want to talk about that.
Christine?
Yeah.
So we found a story not long ago from the 1930s about where some thieves were being chased by the sheriff's department, right?
Well, state police and sheriff.
State police and sheriff, but they were killed by a submachine gun, like a Tommy gun. It was owned by the city, and so
Well, the guns did work.
the thing was that, and in the paper the next day or 2 days later, it turned out that the police department wanted one of those too. Since the
It happened
church
Christmas,
department
happened Christmas Eve, 1935.
started 35. So would that be something you guys would be interested in?
Yeah, because
We took
think
it out
about
of
your
newspaper.
what you were like when you were 10 years old. Would you want to listen to that? Maybe you never grew up, because.
Oh, he did.
I mean, and again, I don't know how we're going to get kids interested in local history, whether or not they read it, whether or not they preserve it. What would be our gift to them for the bicentennial? Hopefully we can organize it so that it's easy for them, so that it's on the web, something where they can just use their tablets to get. Okay, so this is going back in crime, and you can see
you have anything about the Dillinger hideout north of Bloomington?
I don't think we do. I think I would have remembered that. So are you writing that down on your card for me? Okay. Let's see.
Have you got anything on there in 1935 around Christmas Eve?
1935 Christmas Eve. What happened then?
That shooting we were just talking about, I didn't know if somebody ever found that, put it in there or not.
So this is crime for 1890 to 1935. And if we wanted to find out, oh, here's Cohen again, our law student, blind tiger guy. I wanted to show you a little bit. And again, I apologize to the folks in the back who can't see this because it is pretty tiny. But I'm just going to show you some of the Italians in Sanders area, the day labor camps for the limestone mills. The Italians were pretty involved in crime, or they just were targeted, or they were cramped, or they were restless, or they were drunk. But I remember when we were doing the Smithville News, I ran across an article of the headline was shocked because there were 300 Italians in Sanders. And I think the local folks were just shocked. 300 Italians! And I called Dan Combs and I said, is this right? And he says, oh yeah, they were there at the day labor camps and they were looking for jobs. And I said, just the guys, right? And he said, no, their families. Of course they're going to bring their families. And of course they're going to need entertainment. So we went ahead and put some of these headlines in here. Greenwich killed. Blind tiger reported. Christine arrested. Blind tiger. Ross trial. Ross trial. Miller convicted. Ford trial. So what was going on with all of these blind tigers in crime? And a lot of it a lot of the crime was in Sanders area. And we just profiled what the newspaper had given us. And you know, if there's other criminals, the Irish, we would love to put the Irish in there, right? But we just don't have it. So if you see that, you feel like the timeline is a little bit lopsided. We have a lot of Jews, but we don't have enough Catholics. You let us know, and we'll try to get it balanced out so everybody has their moment of sunshine on the timeline. But we went ahead and put this in there because we had it. You see how hungry we are? Just because we have it, we put it in there. Because we don't, it's really hard to find this information to go look for it. So we just thought, well, we'll just put it in there. Gradually, would we delete it off after we wanted a more well-rounded narrative of Monroe County? I don't know. I don't know if we'll do that or not. If you think we should, maybe we will. But I would hope that you'd tell us what you think needs to be in there. Probably our most rich photos come with the buildings. And of course, they're tied to the limestone. Here's the Batman house. And here's a link to the more rich photo of it. People probably know this was a wedding gift. This is obviously before the beautification. Let me talk about photos for a little bit. So anytime we can get our hands on photos, we will try to digitize them and upload them to the internet. But again, we need copyright permission from the photographer or from the person who owns the digital rights. We use a lot of photos from IU Archives and the History Center as well as the Public Library. Does anyone have something that they would like me to look for on the timeline?
You were talking about crimes. My great aunt was murdered. Her name was Alice Carpenter.
What year do you think?
Early 1940s.
The war years are a little bit frustrating for us. They didn't publish any city directories during the civil, or the,
Well, she was murdered by a serial killer. And his name was Blackbeard, if I remember correctly. And this,
are you kidding?
No, and, all of this. All of, okay, now if we find this, you're going to believe it, right? Her name was Alice Carpenter. She was a widow of Earl Collins Carpenter. And he was a veterinarian in her town that died in 1922. And she was my father's aunt. And the only reason I know about this is I went through family papers and found that there was some things he was supposed to inherit that this guy had actually taken all of her money. He married rich widows and then killed them.
In Bloomington?
Oh, yeah, no, the murder didn't happen in Bloomington, but she was born and raised in Bloomington. She was Alice Worley Carpenter.
Oh.
Okay, and she was the wife of my great uncle, Earl Collins Carpenter, who was an early veterinarian here in town.
So where did it happen, George?
I'm not, that's one of the things I just, we're not seeing anything here about how, but she's buried out here in Rose Hill. The man had her cremated naturally as soon as he could after death. That way there wasn't any trace of it. But he went a step too far with somebody that apparently had some family that knew about it, and they caught him and executed him.
So there was somebody had the death penalty in Monroe County?
No, they didn't invoke it here. It was, he met her in Florida. She had moved to Florida during before the Great Depression, and liked it down there. And at this point, she had been a widow for over 20 years. And my great uncle apparently had left her in fairly decent. I've got pictures of them. Everybody knows what the jukes box. There used to be a geode stone house across the street from the jukebox they lived in.
See,
She was a whirly too.
Oh, yeah.
so I'm glad you brought that up, because we say that we only want events as they happen in Monroe County, but of course, events that happen outside of Monroe County do impact our folks. And when the fella who was on the Titanic died, John Crafton, of course the event didn't happen in Monroe County, but Monroe County was shook by that. If you guys don't know the story, when the Titanic went down, it had John Crafton, a limestone king, on it. He had gone to Europe to cure his physical problems, arthritis or whatever, in the natural springs, and he got homesick, and he decided to come home early. Yeah, that'll teach him. Should have been harder.
How about 1948 Greyhound bus wreck on
yeah.
37?
Okay, see, now you're coming up with events that.
That's still the greatest loss of life in a traffic accident in Indiana. 15 or 16.
Which one is this?
By Dolan.
The Dolan wreck.
They all burned to death.
Okay, so you can't see this on in the back. I'll read it to you. 1949, August 10, 16 people burned to death after being trapped in a Greyhound bus wreckage. And we have another source here. It was the worst loss of life in the fire department history at the time. So we wonder, is that still the worst?
I'm pretty sure.
And is it really that big of a deal? Do we really need to track what was the worst fire? I think we do. It's the bicentennial. Let's get our facts right.
My dad was a Greyhound ticket agent when that happened here in Bloomington.
I'm glad you brought that up, because some of us genealogists, if we do have police in our or military in our family history, it sure is nice to know what they were dealing with. You kind of laugh at these blind tigers and the Italians killing each other, and what if your family did grow up in Sanders during that time period? What was it like? I have an ancestor who was a sheriff, and I was just curious, what did he have to deal with? And I'm like, oh my gosh, he had to hang people. Okay, that's good to know, I guess. That was way back then, but still, did Monroe County, what was it like to be a Monroe County cop way back then?
It's the last
public execution in Monroe County?
See, I think a fourth grader would want to know that.
Well, on the way over here, I heard a
A
Black
70-year-old
Struggle
wants to
song,
know that.
and it was the last public execution in West Virginia. And that was in 1897, so I'm guessing it was pre-1900.
I don't think there were any public executions.
We've never had a
in
public
Monroe County.
execution in Monroe County.
I think there is something about,
Oh, I can't believe that.
I think I have to look for the phrase death penalty.
Public execution.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Some of the vocabulary, we are matching the vocabulary that they used at the time. So if you find references to the words Negro in here or colored people, we are matching the words that the newspaper used at the time, but we are tagging it African American. Jury recommends death penalty, 1962. Judge Nat Hill is expected to sentence Emmett Hashfield. Is expected to follow the recommendation of the jury. Jury's returned a verdict. This is the first time a Monroe County jury has asked for the death penalty. Is that true?
1962?
1962.
Killed a child, I'm pretty sure.
So again, I just question that. The newspapers are writing, hey, this is the first time. Is it right? We don't know, and how would we look it up? So
Under crime, put March 1946, or murder, March 1946. See if the mill murders that I told you about are in there.
was that the Lovers?
Yeah.
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 See, I remember that because it
The
kind of
afternoon
has romance in it.
Tryst. Didn't quite pan out.
No, didn't the love affair didn't work out? They got caught, right? They were in a mill having their affair. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this. What do if I switch to limestone? What do I have? No, just boring buildings and cathedrals. No murders. Sorry.
So under crime,
Yeah, we're going back to crime
okay,
for the category of what year?
March 46.
Yeah, I got nothing. So write it down for me. We'll get it in there. Speaking of limestone, I told you that we had already a timeline for limestone, and it's going to take a while to load, or not. You see the little tiny points? We include every time there was a quarry accident or a quarry death. And again, we wanted our kids to know what kind of line of work it was. Some of the newspaper headlines and descriptions of these limestone accidents were pretty detailed, pretty colorful.
You know, regarding the military, this post is named after Burton Woolery.
Okay, let's see if
He
he's in
died
here.
in World War I.
Which again goes back to your aunt.
No, that wasn't Woolery. Her name was Worley.
Oh, okay,
W-O-R-L-Y.
I thought you said Warren. Apparently you're.
There's Burton. And how did we get his image here?
It's interesting.
He was profiled in the yearbook. So this is the school yearbook for the folks that they lost and they're honoring. And there we got the picture of Burton. So if somebody says, how do we get a photo? We're going to be going to where we can. That's already, hopefully it's something that's already digitized.
I have the photos of his funeral.
You have the photos of the funeral. Okay, how many folks, raise their hands, are sitting on a pile of photographs that are precious to our fourth graders, right? So there are some folks who are not going to give these photos up, and for lots of reasons, because I won't give my photos up. I don't know why.
Do you want the originals?
The public library could not take those photos because we don't have a way to care for those photos. The History Center has a program where
Okay.
they'll let you scan the photos and help their collection. What was I going to say? Something about
Can they be added to your collection without you having the actual archive?
Can I scan them and upload them? I would be competing with what the History Center would benefit from. So, yeah, the History Center is the place that takes care of our county's old photos. Yeah, besides IU. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, is Ross Lockridge's suicide?
Is the suicide of Ross Lockridge in here?
1948,
Is it R-I-D-G-E?
RIDGE.
Braintree County is published.
Yes. Yep. Ross Lockridge was the author. Probably junior.
And then, very quietly under here, he dies. Yeah, he commits suicide on March the 6th. And his book is published in January. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Said something there about he did it because of criticism of the book.
Criticism of the book? Did he do?
Well, I think that's just what it said there. If you back.
It is reported that many believe that criticisms of the book led to his death.
But he was being treated for depression for a year or two before that in Indianapolis. But you live here all these years and it's like he never existed. It's so strange. I find that really strange.
You know, this town is so transient. People come and go that I think it's really hard for a couple of people or sectors of the community. One, it's hard to work in a repository in this place and catch up quickly to all of our local history. Second of all, it's when you're working with a nonprofit organization in Monroe County and you're just coming into town. Let's just say you're new to United Way. I guess United Way onboards you. You know, they give you an orientation in Monroe County. They might tell you what their member agencies are, and they might give you a tour of what parts of the town might need extra help. But their institutional knowledge, you know, sometimes you're just onboarding so quickly that you really don't know that much. If you're a new person to Monroe County and you want to run for politics, wouldn't it be nice if you just had a real quick summary of the PCBs if you wanted to be on some commission that you had to deal with our environment? Wouldn't you like a little bit of background knowledge of what's important? If you were doing, you're working in theater in Monroe County, wouldn't you like to know the arts and culture history real quick? It's skimming the top, and it doesn't really touch on all of the interwoven dynamics between town and gown and the rich history of our pioneer families. Yeah.
The town and gown part.
The town and gown part. You know, how do we work this out? You know, let's just talk about marriage for a minute. No. Everyone knows the secret to a good marriage is to marry the opposite, right? Every day is opposite day, right? Like a field trip. Marriage is like a field trip. Yeah. So the town and gown. This town works. The county works. If anyone wants to be inspired as to how we get through this annexation conversation, just look back at what we did before. We did it before. We got through it. We didn't all agree. But apparently we still want to live in this county, and apparently we still want to live in this city, and people keep coming. And I'm hoping that the timeline will give them a way to onboard quickly, to sort of demystify what, you know, I don't have a way to index town and gown. You can help me out. I don't know what category to look for. You got to get a map up there and kind of draw the boundaries.